Have you ever felt completely invisible in your own home? Not physically invisible, of course, but emotionally, like your presence matters only when it's useful to others. That was my reality for as long as I can remember. My name is Audrey, and at 23, I've mastered the art of being the reliable daughter, the one who never causes trouble, the one my parents could always count on while my brother Jason, 25, basked in the spotlight and enjoyed the freedom to find himself. Our family home in Michigan wasn't fancy, just a modest three-bedroom house in a quiet suburban neighborhood. Dad worked as a mechanic at a local auto shop, and Mom was a receptionist at a dental office. Their combined income kept us comfortable, but there was never much extra for luxuries. That's where I came in, the second financial pillar of our household. After finishing high school, I started working at Moonbeam Coffee while attending community college for accounting. It wasn't the most exciting field, but it promised stability and decent pay after graduation. Every month without fail, I would hand over half my paycheck to help with bills and groceries. The other half went toward my tuition and a small savings account I'd been building, determined to graduate debt-free and eventually get my own place. You give them too much of yourself, my coworker Sarah would tell me during our breaks, watching me calculate how much of my tip money would go into the family fund. They're taking advantage of your kindness. They're my family, I would respond, though sometimes I wondered if she might be right. We take care of each other. Sarah would just shake her head, unconvinced. Family should lift you up, not weigh you down. I wish I had listened to her sooner. The inequality between how my parents treated Jason and me wasn't something that happened overnight. It built slowly, almost imperceptibly, until it became our normal family dynamic. When I mentioned wanting to take fewer shifts to focus on my studies, I was reminded about family responsibilities and how we all need to pull our weight. But when Jason decided to quit his job at the warehouse to start a YouTube channel about video games that never got more than 50 views, my parents supported his entrepreneurial spirit. My parents had a particular way of praising me that I now recognize as manipulation. Audrey is so good, so responsible, always thinking of others, they would tell relatives and friends. Never gives us any trouble. What they really meant was that I did what I was told without complaint. I was the reliable one, the one who would sacrifice without making a fuss. For years, I accepted this role, believing that being valued for my usefulness was the same as being loved for who I was. I took pride in contributing to our family expenses. I felt good knowing that my responsible choices made life easier for everyone. I convinced myself that this was what family meant, supporting each other, even if the support seemed to flow primarily in one direction. My bedroom became my sanctuary amidst all this. It wasn't large, maybe 12 feet by 14 feet, but I had made it mine. Unlike the rest of our outdated house, my room reflected my personality. The walls were painted a soft sage green, a project I had undertaken myself during a long weekend 2 years ago. I had saved for months to buy a comfortable queen-sized bed with a quilted headboard and a small writing desk where I would study late into the night. The bookshelves along one wall held my collection of novels and textbooks, carefully organized by subject and color. A small reading nook by the window featured cushions I had sewn myself and a soft throw blanket my grandmother had given me before she passed away. Every item in my room had been purchased with my own money or was a treasured gift. The fairy lights strung across the ceiling had been a splurge after 3 months of picking up extra shifts. The artwork on the walls, mostly prints of nature scenes and motivational quotes, had been collected piece by piece from thrift stores and sales. Even my bedding, a simple but elegant white duvet with yellow accents, had been carefully selected to match the room's peaceful aesthetic. My social life was limited by my busy schedule, but I had managed to form a close friendship with Sarah, 2 years older than me and infinitely more outgoing. She was studying psychology and working at the coffee shop to support herself through school. She lived in a tiny studio apartment near campus and was fiercely independent, having left home at 18 after a falling out with her stepfather. I admired her courage and self-sufficiency, though at the time I couldn't imagine making such a dramatic break from my family. My plans for the future were modest but clear: finish my degree in accounting, find a job at a respectable firm, save enough for a down payment on a small condo. Independence, I thought, would come gradually and without conflict. I never imagined that my departure would be sudden and bitter, or that the family I had sacrificed so much for would be the ones to push me away. The catalyst for change came in the form of Ashley, a 19-year-old with long blonde hair and bright blue eyes, who Jason met at a local bar 5 months ago. He came home one Friday night, unusually excited about a girl he had met. "She's amazing, Aud," he told me as I was getting ready for my morning shift. "You've got to meet her." I was happy for him, genuinely. Jason had dated on and off over the years, but no relationship had lasted more than a few months. He tended to lose interest quickly, or, as happened more often, the girls grew tired of his lack of ambition and financial dependence on our parents. 2 weeks later, Jason brought Ashley home for dinner. She greeted my parents with a warm hug and a plate of store-bought cookies that she casually implied she had baked herself. Throughout dinner, she laughed at all my father's jokes, complimented my mother's cooking, and looked at Jason with wide-eyed adoration. "Your home is so lovely," she told my mother, though our house was modest at best, with its outdated kitchen and worn furniture. "It feels so homey, not like where I grew up." This comment led to the first of many vague references to a difficult childhood. Ashley never provided specific details, but she sprinkled the conversation with hints about moving around a lot and never feeling settled. My parents, especially my mother, were immediately sympathetic. With me, Ashley was polite but distant. She asked perfunctory questions about my studies and job, but showed no real interest in my answers. I noticed a calculating quality in her eyes when she thought no one was looking, a sharp assessment that contrasted with her sugary persona. Still, I kept these observations to myself. Jason seemed happy, and I wanted to support that. Over the next few weeks, Ashley became a fixture in our home. She would often be there when I returned from class or work, comfortably settled on our couch or in the kitchen with my mother. She lived in a shared apartment with difficult roommates, another vague reference to hardship, and seemed to prefer spending time at our house. My parents welcomed her presence, charmed by her flattery and apparent devotion to Jason. It didn't take long for Ashley to make herself at home with my belongings as well. I would find my hair products in the bathroom, with less product than I remembered. My favorite sweater stretched out on Ashley's smaller frame, my laptop open on the kitchen table. When I mentioned these intrusions to Jason, he accused me of being petty. "She doesn't have much of her own stuff," he defended. "Why are you being so selfish? Can't you just share?" I backed down, not wanting to create conflict, but a growing resentment simmered beneath my compliant exterior. It wasn't about the things themselves, but the presumption, the lack of respect for my boundaries. Still, I said nothing, continuing to play my assigned role as the accommodating sister. 3 months into their relationship, Jason and Ashley called a family dinner. My parents and I sat at our small dining table, curious about the announcement that was clearly coming. Jason looked nervous but excited, his arm around Ashley's shoulders. Ashley, for her part, looked triumphant, a small smile playing at the corners of her mouth. "We have some news," Jason said, glancing at Ashley for encouragement. "Ashley is pregnant. We're going to have a baby." Have you ever had that moment where you can physically feel your life about to change? That's what happened to me at that dinner table. I felt my stomach drop as if I'd missed a step on a staircase. Jason had always been vocal about not wanting children, at least not until he was established, whatever that meant for someone who had never held a job longer than 6 months, and they had only known each other for 3 months. It seemed irresponsibly fast. My parents sat in stunned silence for a moment. My father recovered first. "Are you sure?" he asked, his voice unusually serious. Ashley nodded. her hand moving protectively to her still flat stomach. 8 weeks along. We've already been to the doctor. My mother's shock transformed into cautious joy. A grandchild, she said, her eyes filling with tears. I'm going to be a grandmother. As the conversation continued around me, I noticed subtle changes in how my family interacted with me. My father, who usually asked about my classes, seemed distracted and uninterested. My mother, typically attentive to whether I had eaten after my shift, focused entirely on Ashley, offering her seconds and asking if she was comfortable. Later that night, as I was studying in my room, I heard Ashley and Jason talking in the hallway outside my door. "It's perfect," Ashley was saying, her voice low but excited. "Your parents are so supportive. We won't have to worry about rent or bills for a while." "I know," Jason replied. "But what about after the baby comes? We'll need our own space." There was a pause, and I could almost feel Ashley's calculating mind working. "We'll figure that out," she said finally. "One step at a time." I went to bed that night with an uneasy feeling in my stomach. Something was changing in our household, and I suspected it wouldn't be in my favor. But even in my most pessimistic moments, I couldn't have predicted just how drastically my life was about to be upended. Do you know that feeling when everything is about to change, but you're the only one who can see it coming? That's where I found myself that night, lying in my carefully curated bedroom, surrounded by the things I'd worked so hard for, completely unaware that my family was already making plans to take it all away. Have you ever had that moment when the world shifts beneath your feet, and suddenly everything you thought you knew about your place in it changes? 2 weeks after the pregnancy announcement, I experienced exactly that kind of seismic shift. It was a Sunday evening, and I had just returned from an 8-hour shift at the coffee shop. My feet ached, and I had an accounting exam to study for. But when my father called a family meeting, I dutifully joined everyone in the living room. Something about the atmosphere immediately set my nerves on edge. My parents sat side by side on the couch, uncharacteristically serious. Jason and Ashley took the love seat, their hands intertwined. I settled into the armchair, suddenly aware that I was positioned apart from everyone else, an unintentional symbol of what was to come. The tension in the room was palpable. My mother kept smoothing her skirt, a nervous habit she had when uncomfortable conversations were imminent. My father cleared his throat several times before speaking, another telltale sign that something significant was about to be discussed. Jason avoided eye contact with me, staring at the carpet as if it held the secrets of the universe. Only Ashley seemed at ease, a small smile playing at the corners of her mouth. "We need to talk about living arrangements," my father finally said, his voice gruff with discomfort. "With a baby on the way, we need to make some changes around here." I nodded, assuming they were going to discuss converting part of the basement into a nursery, or perhaps talk about Jason and Ashley finding their own place. What came next blindsided me completely. "Ashley needs a proper room," my mother continued, taking over from my father. "Somewhere comfortable where she can rest during her pregnancy and have space for the baby's things." "We could clear out the basement," I suggested, trying to be helpful. "There's that unused space behind the laundry room that could be converted." My parents exchanged uncomfortable glances. "That wouldn't be suitable," my mother said. "It's too damp down there. Not good for a pregnant woman or a newborn." "The guest room, then?" I offered, referring to the small room that currently housed my father's exercise equipment and boxes of holiday decorations. Another exchange of glances. "That room is too small," my father said, "and it doesn't get enough natural light." A cold dread began to pool in my stomach as I realized what they weren't saying. "So, what's the plan?" I asked, though I was beginning to suspect the answer. My mother took a deep breath. "We think the best solution is for Ashley to take your room, Audrey." The words hung in the air like a physical presence. I stared at my mother, certain I had misheard. "My room?" I repeated. "Where would I sleep?" "We would fix up the garage for you," my father said quickly, as if the speed of his words could lessen their impact. Put in some insulation, maybe a space heater for the winter. It would be like having your own apartment. The garage. They wanted to move me to the garage, the uninsulated, concrete-floored storage space that housed our lawnmower, old paint cans, and the perpetual smell of motor oil from my father's car maintenance projects. The space that grew unbearably hot in summer and frigid in winter. The space with no bathroom, no proper windows, and a family of mice that we had been trying unsuccessfully to evict for years. "That's not possible," I said, my voice surprisingly steady despite the turmoil inside me. "My room is my space. I've spent years making it comfortable. I paid for the paint, the furniture, the bedding. Everything in that room is mine." "We know it's a lot to ask," my mother said, though her tone suggested she didn't think it was unreasonable at all. "But Ashley is in a delicate condition. She needs comfort and stability right now." "And I don't?" I asked, my voice rising slightly. "I work nearly full-time while taking a full course load. I contribute to this household financially. Why should I be the one to give up my space?" "Because you're part of this family," my father said, his tone hardening, "and families make sacrifices for each other. Your brother is going to be a father. His needs have to come first right now." I looked at Jason, hoping for some support, some recognition of the unfairness of this request. But he wouldn't meet my eyes. He sat silently, his hand still entwined with Ashley's, saying nothing in my defense. Ashley, for her part, finally spoke. I would be so grateful, Audrey," she said, her voice syrupy sweet. "It would mean so much to me and the baby." She placed her free hand on her stomach, though there was no visible bump yet. I noticed she didn't offer to take the garage herself, nor did she suggest that perhaps she and Jason could find their own place, like most expectant parents would. No. The solution in everyone's mind was clear. Audrey would make the sacrifice. Audrey would be displaced. Audrey would smile and accept this decision, because that's what Audrey always did. "This isn't fair," I said, feeling tears of frustration building behind my eyes, but refusing to let them fall. "That room is the one place in this house that is mine. I paid for everything in it with my own money. The furniture stays in the room," my mother said, as if that were a minor detail. "We'll help you move your personal items to the garage." "So not only do I lose my room, but I lose my furniture too?" I asked incredulously. "The bed I saved for months to buy? The desk I use for studying?" "Ashley will need the desk for when she goes back to school," my father said, "and the bed is more comfortable for her condition." I looked around at their faces, searching for any sign that they recognized the injustice of what they were asking. My mother looked uncomfortable, but determined. My father's expression was closing off, the way it did when he had made up his mind and would not be swayed. Jason still wouldn't look at me. And Ashley watched me with a calculating gaze that transformed into a mask of innocent gratitude whenever my parents glanced her way. "This is wrong," I said finally, my voice quiet but firm. "I won't agree to this." "It's not a request, Audrey," my father said, his tone making it clear that the decision had already been made. "Ashley will be moving into your room at the end of the week. You have until then to pack your things. We'll help you set up the garage," my mother added, as if that would somehow make this betrayal palatable. "We could get some nice curtains, maybe a rug for the floor." I sat in stunned silence, the full weight of their decision crushing down on me. This was my home, my family, the people I had sacrificed for and supported for years. And in the face of this new arrival, this girl who had been in our lives for mere months, I was being cast aside, my needs and feelings dismissed as irrelevant. "You have 1 week to move your things," my mother repeated, apparently taking my silence for acceptance. "We can start tomorrow." I stood up, unable to bear being in their presence for another moment. "I have to study," I said, my voice emotionless. "I have an exam tomorrow." As I walked toward my room that would soon no longer be mine, I heard Ashley's voice behind me, sugary sweet and triumphant. "Thank you so much, Audrey. You're such a wonderful sister." I closed my door and leaned against it, finally allowing the tears to fall. Have you ever felt like you're standing outside your own body, watching a scene unfold that you can't believe is happening to you? That's how I felt in that moment, disconnected from reality, unable to process that my family could so casually discard me. The garage was exactly as I had feared. Despite my parents' promises to make it cozy, it remained a dank, dusty space that no amount of fixing up could transform into a proper bedroom. The concrete floor remained cold despite the thin area rug my mother had bought from the clearance section at Target. The walls were unfinished, with exposed insulation visible in the places where my father had half-heartedly attempted to weatherproof the space. A single bulb hung from the center of the ceiling, casting harsh shadows across my new bedroom. My parents' promises of help with the transition proved as insubstantial as the privacy afforded by the sheet they had hung to separate my sleeping area from the storage section of the garage. My father spent exactly 2 hours on a Saturday morning installing a portable electric heater and declaring the space cozy. My mother contributed a set of faded curtains for the single grimy window and a second-hand dresser with a wobbly drawer. Their obligation fulfilled, they returned to doting on Ashley and her still invisible pregnancy. I was given a twin mattress that had been stored in the attic, its surface lumpy and its corners stained with mysterious marks. My beautiful queen-sized bed, along with my desk, bookshelves, and reading chair, remained in my former room, now occupied by Ashley. The night before I moved out, I had carefully packed my books, clothes, and personal items into boxes. I had taken photographs of my room, a final memorial to the space I had lovingly created. The first night in the garage was the hardest. The thin mattress did little to cushion my body from the hard floor beneath. Every sound was amplified: the hum of the refrigerator on the other side of the wall, the skittering of mice in the corners, the occasional drip from the ceiling when it rained. I lay awake until dawn, alternating between tears of self-pity and simmering rage at the injustice of my situation. Meanwhile, Ashley wasted no time making my former room her own. Within days, she had removed all traces of my presence. The sage green walls that I had painstakingly painted were covered with a sickly sweet pink that made the room look like the inside of a bubblegum wrapper. My carefully arranged bookshelves were cleared to make room for Ashley's collection of makeup and fashion magazines. The corkboard where I had pinned my class schedules, work shifts, and inspiring quotes was now covered with ultrasound images and baby name lists, a constant reminder of the reason for my displacement. You know that feeling when someone takes something that belongs to you and changes it completely? It's like watching a part of yourself being erased, piece by piece. That's what happened every time I glimpsed into what used to be my sanctuary. It wasn't just a room I had lost. It was the physical manifestation of my place in the family, my value in their eyes. As I lay on that lumpy mattress in the garage that first night, listening to the mice scurrying in the walls, something fundamental shifted inside me. The dutiful daughter, the accommodating sister, began to fade away. In her place, a new version of myself was taking shape, one who recognized that sometimes the only way to be valued is to withdraw your presence entirely. I had 1 week to figure out my next move, and for the first time in my life, I would be putting myself first. Have you ever noticed how clarity often comes in your darkest moments? After 3 months of living in the garage, I had established a precarious routine. I would wake at 5:30 in the morning to shower before Ashley might need the bathroom. I would study at the wobbly card table that served as my desk until it was time for class or work. I spent as little time in the house as possible, returning only to sleep or to quickly prepare simple meals that I could eat in my makeshift room. I had become a ghost in my own home, carefully timing my movements to minimize interaction with my family, especially Ashley. Despite these precautions, conflicts continued to arise. Ashley seemed to take particular pleasure in finding new ways to assert her dominance over the household and, by extension, over me. She rearranged the kitchen cabinets without warning, moving items I frequently used to the highest shelves beyond my reach. She, accidentally, deleted recordings of shows I had saved on the DVR. She even took to wearing my clothes openly now, no longer bothering with the pretense of asking or borrowing. You might wonder why I didn't confront her more directly. The truth is, I had tried. Each time, my concerns were dismissed by my family as petty or selfish. "Why can't you just be happy for us?" Jason would demand, when I objected to Ashley wearing my favorite sweater, stretching it beyond recognition with her growing belly. "This is your niece or nephew we're talking about. Do you really care more about a stupid sweater than your own family?" The irony of his question, given how little the family seemed to care about my comfort or well-being, was apparently lost on him. I had been saving for months to buy a new laptop, my old one having become increasingly unreliable. After picking up extra shifts and cutting back on all non-essential expenses, I finally had enough. The new laptop wasn't top of the line, but it was perfect for my needs. Fast enough for the accounting software I needed for classes, with enough storage for my assignments and projects. I had splurged on an extended warranty, knowing this computer would need to last me through graduation and beyond. For security, I kept the laptop in the garage with me, rather than bringing it into the house where Ashley might borrow it. One Tuesday afternoon, I returned from class early, having finished an exam more quickly than expected. As I approached the side door of the garage, I heard movement inside. Quietly, I opened the door to find Ashley rummaging through my belongings. "What are you doing in here?" I asked, startling her. Ashley jumped, then quickly composed herself. "Oh, Audrey, I was just looking for that blue sweater of yours, the one with the little pearl buttons. I wanted to wear it to my doctor's appointment tomorrow." I noticed my laptop case on the floor beside her, unzipped and empty. "Where is my laptop?" I asked, my voice dangerously calm. Ashley's expression flickered between innocence and calculation, before settling on defensiveness. "I don't know what you're talking about." "My laptop, the one that was in that case." I pointed to the empty bag. "Where is it?" "Oh, that old thing," she said, waving dismissively. "I thought you had gotten a new one. That one barely worked anymore." "Ashley," I said, taking a step toward her, "what did you do with my laptop?" She took a step back, one hand moving protectively to her slightly rounded belly, in a gesture I had come to recognize as her go-to move when feeling threatened. "Don't use that tone with me. You know I'm in a delicate condition." "My laptop," I repeated, not backing down. After a moment of standoff, Ashley sighed dramatically. "Fine, I sold it. Happy now?" The words hit me like a physical blow. "You sold my laptop? My brand new laptop that I just bought last week?" "We needed the money," she said, as if that justified theft. "Jason is trying to start his own business, and we needed capital." That business was Jason's latest scheme, buying cheap items from garage sales and trying to resell them online for profit. He had made exactly $27 in the past month, while spending hundreds on inventory that now cluttered the basement. "You stole from me," I said, my voice shaking with rage. "That laptop cost me $800. It had all my schoolwork on it." "Don't be so dramatic." Ashley rolled her eyes. "Everything is in the cloud these days, right? And anyway, you can just buy another one. You're always working. You must have money saved." The casualness with which she dismissed the theft of my property, the fruit of months of extra shifts and careful saving, was the final straw. I felt something snap inside me, a last thread of family loyalty breaking. "Get out," I said quietly. "Get out of my space right now." Ashley's eyes widened at my tone. I had never spoken to her like that before, had never allowed my true feelings to show so plainly. For a moment, she seemed uncertain, but then her expression hardened. "Fine," she said, pushing past me toward the door. "I was leaving anyway. This place smells like desperation." That evening, I confronted my family at dinner, a meal I rarely joined anymore, but felt this situation warranted my presence. I explained what had happened, laying out the facts as calmly as I could, despite my simmering anger. The response was worse than I could have imagined. Ashley burst into tears before I had even finished speaking. "I was just trying to help Jason," she sobbed. "Audrey is making it sound like I stole from her, but I was going to pay her back eventually. And now she's stressing me out, which is stressing the baby." My mother immediately moved to comfort her, shooting me a disapproving glance. "Audrey, look what you've done. You know Ashley needs to stay calm for the baby's sake." "She sold my laptop," I repeated, wondering if they had somehow missed this crucial point. "My brand new laptop that I paid for with my own money, without asking me. That's theft." "I'm sure she didn't mean any harm," my father said, his tone suggesting I was overreacting. "These pregnancy hormones can affect judgment sometimes. You need to be more understanding." I looked at Jason, hoping for some support, some acknowledgement of the wrongness of what had happened. Instead, he glared at me accusingly. "Why are you always trying to make Ashley look bad?" he demanded. "She's carrying your niece or nephew, and all you can think about is your stupid laptop. How selfish can you be?" "Selfish?" I repeated incredulously. "I've given up my room, my privacy, half my paycheck every month. I live in a garage while contributing to the household expenses, and I'm selfish for not wanting my property stolen?" "If you can't be supportive of this family during this special time," my father said, his voice taking on the stern tone that once would have immediately silenced me, "then maybe you should consider other living arrangements." The words hung in the air between us. Not an explicit eviction, but close enough. The message was clear. Accept the theft. Apologize to Ashley for upsetting her. Or leave. I looked around at their faces. These people who shared my blood, but seemed unable to see me as a person deserving of basic respect and fairness. My mother avoiding my eyes as she patted Ashley's hand. My father stern and unyielding in his judgment. Jason glaring at me with hostility for daring to challenge his pregnant girlfriend. And Ashley watching me through her fingers as she pretended to sob, a calculating gleam visible only to me. "I see," I said finally, pushing back from the table. "Thank you for making your priorities crystal clear." I returned to the garage, shaking with a mixture of rage and grief. As I entered, I noticed something on the floor that I had missed earlier, a torn page from one of my textbooks. Curious, I checked my school bag and found that my carefully organized study materials for my upcoming final exams had been destroyed. Pages had been ripped from my textbooks, notes crumpled, and flashcards snapped in half. This was not accidental damage. This was deliberate sabotage. Have you ever reached that point where you know, with absolute certainty, that a relationship is beyond repair? That's where I found myself that night, sitting among the torn remnants of my academic work. I called Sarah immediately, no longer caring if my voice carried into the house. "They've gone too far," I said when she answered, my voice shaking. "Ashley stole and sold my new laptop. They're defending her, and someone destroyed my study materials for finals." Sarah listened without interrupting as I poured out the whole story, my words tumbling over each other in my rush to expel the poisonous situation from my system. "Come stay with me," she said immediately when I finished. "My roommate moved out last month. You can have her room until you figure out what to do next." "I can't just leave," I said, though even as the words left my mouth, I questioned them. "Why not?" "Why not?" Sarah echoed my thoughts. "They've made it clear they don't respect you or your property. Why stay somewhere you're not wanted or valued?" "Why, indeed?" The question echoed in my mind as we talked. By the time we hung up, a plan was beginning to form. Not just a temporary escape to Sarah's apartment, but something more permanent, more dramatic. A complete disappearance from the lives of people who had shown they didn't deserve my presence. "You don't just have to leave," Sarah had said. "You can vanish so completely they'll never find you unless you want to be found. And from the sound of it, they don't deserve to find you." That night, as I lay on my lumpy mattress, listening to the sounds of the family laughing in the living room, I made my decision. I would not just move out. I would disappear so thoroughly that they would be forced to confront the reality of my absence. I would show them exactly what they were losing by treating me as disposable. I pulled out a notebook and began to make a list. New apartment, new job, new phone number, new bank account, a new life free from the expectations and demands of people who took without giving, who claimed love while showing none. The next morning, I woke with a clarity I hadn't felt in months. The path forward was suddenly obvious, and every step I needed to take lined up in my mind like dominoes waiting to fall. I would disappear, not out of spite, but out of self-preservation. My family had made their choice, prioritizing Ashley and her questionable pregnancy over the daughter who had supported them unfailingly for years. Now it was time to make my choice. Sarah proved to be an invaluable ally in my escape plan. Her apartment, a modest two-bedroom unit in a quiet complex across town, would be my temporary haven while I established my new life. She helped me search online for affordable apartments in neighboring cities, eventually finding a studio within my budget in a town 30 minutes away, far enough to prevent accidental encounters, but close enough to maintain my job and classes. The security deposit is steep, I worried, looking at the listing. Use the money you've been giving your parents, Sarah suggested. For once, put it toward your own future instead of theirs. She was right. The money I had been contributing to household expenses would more than cover the deposit and first month's rent. I submitted an application that day, using Sarah's address for correspondence, to ensure my family would not intercept any mail. Next came the financial disentanglement. I visited a different branch of my bank, one my family never used, and opened a new account under just my name. I transferred the majority of my savings, leaving only enough in the joint account I shared with my parents to avoid immediate suspicion. I requested that all correspondence be electronic only, no paper statements that might be delivered to my home address. My job at Moonbeam Coffee presented a more complicated challenge. I loved my coworkers and the familiar routine, but I knew my family would look for me there first. After discussing options with the manager, who had always been supportive, I arranged a transfer to another location in the town where my new apartment would be. The manager even offered a small raise to compensate for the longer commute, a gesture that brought tears to my eyes. Not everyone in my life took my contributions for granted. Classes were the easiest part of the transition. With finals approaching, most courses were winding down, and many had online options for submitting final projects. I spoke with my academic advisor, explaining that I was dealing with family issues that might require relocation. She helped me register for next semester's classes with fully online options wherever possible, minimizing the need for campus appearances where my family might look for me. The physical move required more subtlety. I couldn't simply pack my belongings and leave, as the sight of moving boxes would immediately alert my family. Instead, I adopted a gradual approach, taking a few items each day in my backpack when leaving for work or class. Clothes, books, important documents, and sentimental possessions disappeared from the garage bit by bit, stored temporarily in Sarah's spare room. For larger items, we devised a strategy. Sarah would park down the street during times when my family was known to be out. I would quickly load a few bigger things into her car, and she would drive them to her apartment. Over 2 weeks, my presence in the garage slowly diminished, though I was careful to leave enough visible items that a casual glance would not reveal the depletion. The laptop theft turned out to be a blessing in disguise. With my school files compromised, I had legitimate reason to spend long hours at the campus computer lab, providing cover for my apartment hunting and job transfer arrangements. I told my family I was trying to recover my work, a partial truth that explained my extended absences. Throughout this process, I maintained a facade of normalcy at home. I continued my routine of early showers and late returns. I made brief appearances at family meals when unavoidable, responding to questions with non-committal answers. I even apologized to Ashley for overreacting about the laptop, swallowing my pride to maintain the illusion that nothing had changed. All the while, I was systematically removing myself from their lives, piece by piece. 3 weeks after Ashley sold my laptop, my new apartment was ready. The space was small but clean, with large windows that filled the room with natural light. The building was secure, requiring a key fob for entry, and located in a quiet neighborhood near a park. It had none of the luxury of my former bedroom, but it offered something infinitely more valuable: independence. Sarah helped me move the last of my belongings on a Tuesday, when everyone in my family would be out for the day. My father had a golf game with colleagues. My mother was attending a baby shopping trip with Ashley, and Jason was meeting with potential investors for his latest business scheme. We had a 6-hour window to complete the final phase of my disappearance. As I stood in the nearly empty garage that had been my reluctant home for 3 months, I felt a complex mixture of emotions: sadness for the family relationships that had deteriorated beyond repair, anger at the injustices I had endured, fear about the uncertainties ahead. But mostly, I felt a growing sense of liberation, of reclaiming control over my own life. I left no dramatic letter detailing my grievances, no itemized list of their failures as family members. Such explanations would only give them material to twist and use against me, to paint me as overly sensitive or demanding. Instead, I left a single note card propped on the bare mattress. Do not try to find me. I have given you everything you asked for. As Sarah and I drove away, the house growing smaller in the rearview mirror, I felt something unexpected: relief. The constant tension of navigating that toxic environment, of diminishing myself to accommodate others' demands, had been a weight I had carried for so long that I had forgotten what it felt like to set it down. Do you know that weird feeling of waking up in a new place, where for just a moment you're completely disoriented until reality comes rushing back? That sensation greeted me every morning in my new apartment for the first few weeks. The sunlight fell differently through these windows. The sounds were unfamiliar: distant traffic instead of my father's snoring, neighbors' footsteps instead of Ashley's frequent trips to the bathroom. Each time, I'd experience a brief flash of panic, followed by a wave of relief as I remembered. I chose this. I was free. My new apartment was a blank canvas. The furniture was minimal: a futon that served as both couch and bed, a small table with 2 chairs, a dresser found at a thrift store. But every item was mine, chosen by me, arranged according to my preferences. For the first time in months, I didn't have to consider how my existence might inconvenience someone else. I could play music without headphones, cook foods with strong smells, take a shower at midnight if I wanted to. Simple freedoms that felt revolutionary after months of constraints. Through Sarah, who remained my connection to my former life, I heard about the aftermath of my disappearance. My family's reaction unfolded in stages, each more revealing than the last. First came confusion. My mother reportedly entered the garage the day after I left, intending to ask me to pick up some groceries on my way home. Finding the space empty except for the note, she initially assumed I was staying with a friend temporarily to cool off after the laptop incident. She called my old phone number repeatedly, unaware I had already changed it. Confusion gave way to concern when I failed to return for dinner, then for breakfast the next day. My father called the coffee shop, only to be told I no longer worked at that location. He drove to campus, searching the library and computer labs where I typically studied. No one had seen me. They filed a missing person report, Sarah told me over dinner at my apartment a week after my departure. The police came to the coffee shop asking questions. What happened? I asked, both alarmed and strangely touched that they had gone to such lengths. Not much. Once the officers confirmed you're over 18 and left voluntarily, they told your parents there was nothing they could do. You're an adult who chose to leave. The family dynamics began to fracture under the stress of my absence. Without me to focus their attention on, they turned on each other. Jason blamed our parents for driving me away with their unreasonable demands. Our parents blamed Jason for bringing Ashley into the household and disrupting the family balance. And Ashley, finding herself no longer the unchallenged center of attention, grew increasingly demanding and irritable. Your mom called me yesterday, Sarah mentioned about 2 weeks into my new life. She was crying, asking if I knew where you were. I said I hadn't heard from you, which wasn't technically a lie since you were sitting right next to me when she called. I felt a pang of guilt at causing my mother pain, but it was quickly replaced by the memory of her comforting Ashley after the laptop theft, of her casual dismissal of my feelings when they decided to move me to the garage. Sometimes the kindest thing you can do for yourself is to stop trying to earn love from people who have shown they're incapable of giving it freely. My new routine took shape gradually. I worked my shifts at the new coffee shop location, where I was quickly promoted to shift supervisor, recognition of skills that had gone unacknowledged at home. I attended my remaining classes online and began planning for the next semester. I explored my new neighborhood, finding a small park where I could read in the evenings and a library with quiet study rooms perfect for preparing for finals. The most challenging adjustment wasn't practical, but emotional. Years of conditioning had taught me to put others' needs before my own, to seek approval as validation of my worth, to sacrifice without complaint. Breaking these patterns required constant vigilance. When my new manager asked if I could cover an extra shift, my immediate instinct was to say yes, regardless of my own plans. When a classmate needed help with an assignment, I nearly canceled my own study session to accommodate them. You're allowed to say no, Sarah reminded me over coffee one morning. Your value doesn't decrease when you prioritize yourself. It was a simple statement, but one that required daily practice to internalize. Each time I established a boundary, declining an inconvenient request, expressing a preference, making a decision based solely on my own desires, it felt both terrifying and exhilarating, like exercising a muscle I'd never used before. About a month after my disappearance, Sarah brought news that changed everything. "You're not going to believe this," she said, practically bursting through my door one evening. "Ashley isn't pregnant. Never was." I set down my textbook, stunned. "What? How do you know?" Jason found a fake silicone belly in her closet and receipts for pregnancy symptom medication. There was a huge fight. The neighbors could hear them screaming at each other. "She's been faking it the whole time." The revelation shouldn't have surprised me as much as it did. There had always been something off about Ashley's pregnancy, from the convenient timing to the inconsistent symptoms. Still, the confirmation of such deliberate deception was shocking. "What happened?" I asked. "She left, but not before taking some things with her. Your mom's jewelry, your dad's golf clubs, and that collection of rare coins your grandfather left Jason." I shook my head, trying to process this information. All that upheaval in our family, my displacement, the drama, the tension, all for a pregnancy that never existed. My sacrifice had been for nothing more than a con. "How's Jason taking it?" I asked, surprised to find I still cared about my brother's well-being despite everything. "Not well. He's barely leaving his room, according to my cousin, who lives down the street from your parents. Your dad's furious about the stolen items, and your mom—" Sarah hesitated. "What about her?" "She seems to have aged years in just weeks. She's been going around to all the coffee shops in the area looking for you. She almost found you last Tuesday, actually. She came into your location while you were in the back room doing inventory." I felt my chest tighten. "She was there? Did she see me?" "No. Marissa covered for you. Your mom left a business card. Asked them to call if they saw a girl named Audrey. Marissa trashed it as soon as she left." The image of my mother searching coffee shops, leaving her contact information with baristas, stirred conflicting emotions. Part of me wanted to reach out, to assure her I was safe. Another part remembered how quickly she had chosen Ashley's comfort over mine, how easily she had accepted the loss of my bedroom, my privacy, my dignity. "Your dad hired a private investigator," Sarah continued, "but apparently gave up after a couple of weeks when it got too expensive." I couldn't help but laugh bitterly at the irony. "He wouldn't spend money to help me get an apartment when I lived there, but he'll pay a PI after I'm gone?" As the weeks turned into months, my new life became more established, more real. My apartment accumulated small touches that made it truly mine. Plants on the windowsill, art on the walls, books on shelves I'd built myself. I excelled in my classes, unburdened by the constant stress of navigating family tension. My promotion at the coffee shop came with a raise, recognition of my reliability and work ethic that had always been taken for granted at home. The most profound changes, however, were internal. I began to recognize my own worth independent of what I could do for others. I learned to identify my preferences, to voice my opinions without fear of disapproval, to make choices based on my own desires rather than anticipated expectations. I discovered parts of myself that had been suppressed for years: a dry sense of humor, a passion for photography, a preference for spontaneity over rigid planning. Yet despite this growth, there were moments of doubt, of longing for the family I wished I had, rather than the one that had pushed me away. Holidays were particularly difficult. Thanksgiving came and went with an invitation from Sarah to join her family's celebration, an experience both comforting and painful in its contrast to the tension-filled gatherings of my childhood. "Do you ever think about contacting them?" Sarah asked as we decorated a small Christmas tree in my apartment. "Sometimes," I admitted. But then I remember how easily they replaced me, how quickly they dismissed my feelings, and I'm not sure what there is to go back to. The hardest challenge wasn't staying away physically. It was resisting the emotional pull, the lifetime of conditioning that made me feel responsible for their happiness, for the stability of a family that had shown so little regard for mine. Each time I heard news of their struggles, Jason's depression, my mother's distress, my father's health problems that developed in the wake of my departure, I had to fight against the ingrained impulse to rush back and fix everything, to resume my role as the reliable daughter who sacrificed without complaint. 6 months after my disappearance, as I sat in my sun-dappled apartment enjoying a quiet Sunday morning, I received an email that made my heart skip. The subject line read simply, "We miss you." It was from my mother. Have you ever stared at an unopened email for so long that it begins to feel like a living thing? The message from my mother sat in my inbox for 3 full days. The subject line, "We miss you," simultaneously pulling me in and pushing me away. Each time my phone notification light blinked, I felt my stomach tighten, knowing that eventually I would have to decide whether to read her words or delete them unread. On the fourth day, sitting in my favorite corner of my apartment with a cup of tea for moral support, I finally opened it. "Dear Audrey," it began, "I don't know if you will ever read this, but I need to try. The past 6 months have been the hardest of my life. Not knowing where you are, if you're safe, if you're happy, has been a constant ache that never goes away. I wake up every morning hoping today will be the day you come back to us, and go to bed every night with that hope unfulfilled." The message continued with updates about the family. Ashley had left shortly after my disappearance, taking with her several valuable items and leaving Jason heartbroken and humiliated when her pregnancy fraud was exposed. My father had developed high blood pressure from the stress and had been forced to reduce his work hours. The house felt empty and quiet without me. "We made terrible mistakes," my mother admitted toward the end of the email. "We took you for granted. We expected sacrifices from you that we had no right to ask. We chose Ashley over you, and it was the worst decision we ever made. I don't expect forgiveness, but I want you to know that we are sorry and we miss you every day." She concluded by providing her phone number, though she acknowledged I had likely changed mine, and an invitation to contact her if and when I felt ready. I closed the email without responding, needing time to process its contents. The apology seemed genuine, but it also felt incomplete. There was acknowledgement of their mistakes, but little insight into the deeper patterns that had allowed those mistakes to happen in the first place. They missed me now that I was gone, but had they valued me when I was there? Over the next few weeks, I discussed the email with Sarah, and with the therapist I had started seeing to help process my family trauma. Both encouraged me to respond on my own terms, when and if I felt ready, without feeling obligated to re-establish contact if it didn't serve my well-being. You get to decide what relationship you want with them moving forward, my therapist emphasized, not based on what they want or what you think a daughter should do, but based on what's healthy for you. After much reflection, I composed a brief reply. I confirmed that I was safe and doing well, but made no mention of my location or specific circumstances. I acknowledged receipt of her apology, but neither accepted nor rejected it. I closed by saying I needed more time before considering any form of reconciliation. My mother responded immediately, clearly relieved to have established contact. Her message was respectful of my boundaries, expressing gratitude for my response without pushing for more than I was willing to give. Over the next few weeks, we exchanged occasional emails. I remained vague about my life details, but shared some of my feelings about what had happened, articulating for the first time the years of unequal treatment and taken for granted sacrifices that had culminated in the garage incident. To my surprise, my mother listened, not perfectly, not without occasional defensive reactions, but with a genuine effort to understand my perspective. She revealed that my departure had forced the family to confront uncomfortable truths about how they had treated me and the dysfunctional dynamics they had enabled. "Your father and I have started marriage counseling," she wrote in one message. "The therapist is helping us see patterns we never recognized before. How we placed different expectations on you and Jason, how we enabled his dependence while demanding your independence. We have a long way to go, but we're trying to be better people." 3 months after the first email, I agreed to meet my mother at a coffee shop halfway between our homes. I arrived early, securing a table near the exit with a clear view of the door, an unconscious preparation for quick escape if needed. When she entered, I barely recognized her. She had aged years in the 9 months since I had last seen her. Her hair grayer, her posture more stooped, her face lined with new wrinkles of worry and regret. She spotted me and froze momentarily, as if afraid I might vanish again if she moved too quickly. I raised a hand in awkward acknowledgement, and she approached, clearly restraining herself from rushing to embrace me. "Audrey," she said, her voice thick with emotion. "Thank you for meeting me." We talked for 2 hours, the conversation alternating between painfully honest and awkwardly superficial. She apologized again, more specifically this time, acknowledging not just the garage incident, but the years of imbalanced expectations. I shared some details about my new life, my job promotion, my academic success, carefully omitting any information that might reveal my exact location. She asked if I would consider coming home for a visit. I declined, explaining that I wasn't ready for that step and might never be. The hurt in her eyes was evident, but she nodded in acceptance. "Whatever relationship we have moving forward will be on your terms," she said. "We lost the right to make demands when we treated you the way we did." As we prepared to leave, she handed me a small box. Inside was my grandmother's necklace, a simple gold pendant I had always admired, but had been promised to Jason's future wife in the family tradition of passing down female heirlooms. "This should have been yours all along," my mother said, "not because you're the good daughter who deserves a reward, but because you're our daughter, period, worthy of love and consideration regardless of what you do for us." I left that meeting with mixed feelings, but a sense that something had shifted, if not healed. Over the subsequent months, I maintained cautious contact with my mother through occasional coffee meetings and emails. I spoke with my father on the phone twice, brief, awkward conversations that nevertheless represented more honest communication than we had managed in years. Jason was the last to reach out, sending a text message on my birthday that simply read, "I miss you, sis. I was wrong. I'm sorry." I responded with thanks for the wishes, but made no promises about reconnecting. As the 1-year anniversary of my departure approached, I found myself reflecting on how much had changed. My apartment, once sparse and functional, had become a true home filled with plants, books, and art that reflected my personality. I had been promoted again at work, and was on track to graduate with honors. I had made new friends, joined a hiking club, started learning to play the guitar, all activities I would never have had time for while supporting my family. Most importantly, I had developed a strong sense of self-worth that was no longer dependent on external validation or usefulness to others. I had learned to set boundaries and to recognize when relationships were becoming unhealthy. I had discovered that being alone was far preferable to being surrounded by people who diminished me. My relationship with my family remained complicated. We were slowly rebuilding trust, but on a completely different foundation than before. I made it clear that I would never again live under their roof or allow my needs to be sacrificed for someone else's comfort. They were learning, imperfectly but sincerely, to see me as a person with inherent value rather than a resource to be utilized. On the anniversary of my departure, I drove past our old house, parking across the street to observe from a distance. The garage door was open, revealing that the space had been cleared out and converted back to its original purpose. My old bedroom window had new curtains, neutral beige rather than Ashley's pink or my sage green. The house looked smaller somehow, less intimidating than in my memories. As I sat there, I realized that the sight no longer filled me with pain or anger. Those emotions hadn't disappeared, but had transformed into something more complex, a melancholy acknowledgement of what had been lost alongside appreciation for what had been gained. The family that had pushed me away had suffered consequences for their choices, just as I had suffered for mine. The difference was that my suffering had led to growth and independence, while theirs had led to regret and loss. In forcing me into that garage, they had inadvertently pushed me toward finding my true strength. In treating me as disposable, they had taught me that I was anything but. The hardest lesson of my life had been learning that sometimes you must remove yourself from those who cannot see your worth, not out of vengeance, but out of self-preservation. I started my car, taking one last look at the house before driving away. I wasn't returning to it, not today, and perhaps not ever as a resident, but I was moving forward with a clear understanding of my own value and the kind of relationships I deserved. Sometimes the most powerful thing you can do is disappear from the lives of people who don't appreciate you, not to punish them, but to create space for your own growth, not to make them realize what they've lost, but to discover what you have to gain. In my case, what I gained was myself, undiminished and unapologetic.